Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer, and welcome to Tennis Manager 2023. This is a tutorial for the game, and specifically infrastructure and finances, which is probably the trickiest part of this game, depending on how you set yourself up when you start. Now, of course, two of the primary options that you have when you first start up the game is to choose what level of infrastructure you begin with, and then how much finances you have, how much money you have in the bank. It is really tough when you pick the lowest of either, but it is doable. It is quite doable, and I've actually been doing it in my Let's Play. So if you have not seen that, please feel free to check it out for verification that you can take the most difficult start, the lowest of either setting, and still be successful and still make money. But here's how you can be economical and develop your infrastructure as well. The infrastructure is broken down into 4 different categories or 4 different tabs that you have. You have your sports center, you have your medical center, your youth and scouting center, and finally your business center. Each of these function differently from one another. Internally, all of the inner components, such as these 5 business center subcategories, all operate identical to one another, except that each have their own kind of specific set of rules. So we'll pay attention to each of these factors as we go through. So we're going to begin by discussing the sports center and what it means to you financially. First off, this is a useful tool to find the information you need right here within the game, but revenues impacted by, and this one, if as you hover over it, use by the team. Now this information only goes so far to tell you what it is you need to know, but what it says here, the more training facilities are available for hire, the more they'll earn. The fill rate of your team and its participation in tournaments have a direct impact on revenue. Here's what I've come to understand about the sports center. Your staff has an impact on a lot of what you're going to do financially in this game. However, the sports center is completely unaffected by it. So no matter what you have for staff, if you have the best staff, if you have a small but good staff, if you have the worst staff, if you have no staff at all, irregardless of any of that, your sports center is not impacted at all by the staff. It is impacted by your team. Now here it mentions participation in tournaments. I've tested this. I see no direct correlation to your revenue from the sports center and participation in tournaments. However, I would assume, as I didn't get far enough through my testing, I would assume that having a different number of squad members in relation to what your capacity for squad members is, I would imagine that will impact what you get revenue-wise from the sports center. So keep that one in mind. But participation, their schedule, you can do every single tournament in a month. You can do nothing but training. Either way, or a mixture of the two, it will not change the revenue. What I have learned, though, is that your sports center will earn roughly 3/5, starting out anyway, at the beginning of the game, when you have just that one member, one athlete. It'll earn just shy of 60% what the expected or max revenue would be. And then that's going to stay the same. So having that stationary target is kind of a good measuring point. The sports center is pretty consistent, and that helps. Now we're going to talk about the upgrades themselves and what to do first in a little bit, but let me break down the other 3 main tabs in your infrastructure area first. Medical center is next. Now the medical center has a lot less going on. There's only 6 sub facilities within the medical center. But this one, revenues are impacted by the better and larger your medical staff is, the more income it will generate when providing services to patients outside the academy. Meaning, in a real world type scenario, your doctors, their first job is to service your athletes. But they don't spend all their time doing that. So when they aren't doing that, they take outside patients, and taking those outside patients generates additional revenue, and therefore they make money. You make money. Now the medical center is, and you can see it in the description, it is directly impacted by your staff, specifically your medical staff, your physios. Physios on staff are good. Here's what I've largely discovered when it comes to the physios. Whatever their salary is, the salary of your physio, let's say they're making 1.4K monthly, the impact from having no staff whatsoever to having the salary of your medical staff, it scales pretty much evenly. Meaning if they are adding 1.4K in salary, you are going to roughly add 1.4K in revenue and no other additional costs on top of it. Your physios more or less will pay for themselves, meaning keep your physio staff. Your physio staff is fine to have. Affording kind of the best that you can manage to afford is going to have a positive benefit and no net loss or gain in terms of overall finances, because it's going to offset. It will scale with. So if you have a 4K salary, the medical center is going to have an improved revenue of roughly 4K. As we move on to the youth and scouting center, this one has two tabs that impact it. First, the quality of the staff. Better the quality of your staff is, the more quality training it will be able to provide and thereby generate more income. And then you also have notoriety of the players. Having high profile pro players on your team will encourage more young players to train at your campus. Now, on this last one, it doesn't say anything about your income. It talks about encouraging more young players to train there. What I wonder that one means is the higher profile athletes you have, the better profile athletes you can sign, is what I think that one refers to. I don't think that that's going to have any direct impact on your income, but I'm still early enough in my Let's Play that I haven't quite gotten to a firm answer on that one, with one player rising in profile and seeing a youth and scouting center income slowly increase on its own. I haven't seen any correlation to that. Therefore, I think it has more to do with it takes one to know one. You get somebody popular is encouraged to join, right? So increased popularity, you can't just go out and buy the best athlete in the world when you have no reputation. You've got to already have one of those, and then they're going to see, oh, wow, you have this wonderful athlete. Okay, we'll sign with you. But in the quality of the staff part, this one is very much impacting what's going on revenue-wise in your youth and scouting center. Now, it talks about quality of the staff, but it's not specific. Well, I've done the testing here as well. It's not to do with coach. The coach is the one who directly works with the individual athlete at the tournaments. The trainers are the ones that work at the facilities, and it's the trainers that impact this category. But here's the thing about this one. The trainers actually have a negative impact to what's going on here. No staff at all is actually the best net income that you're going to earn in your youth and scouting center. And as you add staff, or at least add lower quality staff anyway, as you add trainers, you're going to get diminishing returns. Not only are you going to earn less in the youth and scouting center itself, but you're also going to have to pay the salary of those trainers on top of it. So trainers, as helpful as they are to develop your young talent, until your finances are in a secure state, avoid them. Use your initial coach that you have to do your training. It's going to slow down progress, but financially makes a huge difference. Huge difference. For example, something I'm talking about here with this one. Base revenue, net, a simple setup like this with just a few categories ticked, earns about $5,500 a month over the expenses without any staff. You add in a 4K staff member and the revenue decreases by $1,000, plus you have that 4K salary, so you're only earning 4.5K. So your net gain now is only $500, half $1,000 from $5,500. So it decreases by 5K, just like that. Be really careful about that youth and scouting center early on. Later, you 100% want to have trainers, need to have trainers to develop quicker, faster, but it's going to have a snowball negative effect on finances. So be very careful in this category. And finally, we move to the business center, which has the smallest quantity of subcategories. But here we have players' fame. Having high-profile pro players on your team will benefit the Academy's image and our business. Also, players' rankings. Presence of pro players in the top 10 is an undeniable asset for the business, and filling rate. An empty or underfilled team is nonsense for an academy. Be sure that our team is well populated, or our image and income will suffer. So, threefold: fame, rank, number of team members versus the number you can possibly have. This one, well, it's pretty clear what's happening here. Your base income when you start out, it's going to be at its lowest, but the more their fame improves, the more their rank improves, and the more you start filling out your squad, the better the income rate's going to be here. This one's going to start closer to 40% of the possible max income. Over time, the improvement of that fame, that rank, and filling out that squad will only increase that number towards that 100% range. So that takes us back to the financial side of things. Now that we know a little bit about the 4 main infrastructure categories, here's the finances in general. If you take the lowest infrastructure setting at the beginning of the game, if you take one of the lower, and especially if you take the lowest income or financial setting, how much money you have in the bank setting at the beginning of the game, the lower that is, the harder it's going to be to get started. Day one recommendation: spend every last dollar you have on infrastructure upgrades to start offsetting the losses, because in the lowest infrastructure setting, you're going to lose money. You're going to get into a negative balance. Once you are at a negative balance, you can't spend money. The game doesn't kick you out. They don't bankrupt you or anything like that. And actually, at the end of every year in December, the board is going to give you a cash injection. And that cash injection will offset those losses and get you back to a positive balance as long as you didn't go insane on the expenses. And that's why, like Youth and Scouting Center, losing $5,000 up front because you have an expensive trainer, you may want to invest very quickly in letting go of the trainers you have so that the Youth and Scouting Center is, $5K better off per month in terms of how much you're losing. But as long as that cash injection, which even on the lowest setting is over $200,000 at the end of the year, as long as you've kept that deficit below $200,000, you'll come out with a positive balance. And even if it's small, even if it's minor, even if you can only afford a single upgrade, that single upgrade will make the deficit less bad the following year. And over time, it might start as a very tiny snowball, but you will have the snowball effect of generating more and more revenue year by year, even if minimal, even if you are stuck in a negative balance cycle for a number of years. Eventually, the right infrastructure upgrades, you will not only survive, but you will start to generate the income necessary to not be dealing in negative balances on a regular basis and improving net gains month by month or year by year. You will succeed. It is entirely possible, even from the hardest setup. It's just hard, but you got to play your cards right. So if we're talking about tight finances, let's start with the staff. You have no salary, so you're awesome. You're golden. You can't fire yourself anyway. But any other coaches, if we're talking tight budget, they don't help. They only hurt. Their salary, even if it's small, sets you back further and further month by month. You start with only one athlete. You are a coach. You're coaching that athlete. You don't need additional coaches. Trainers, as already noted, have a negative impact, not only with their salary, but they have a negative impact on the returns in the Youth and Scouting Center. Get rid of your trainers. Physios do not have a negative impact. Their salary offsets, therefore you can hang on to your physios. You do not need to fire them. It's okay to have better physios as well because, again, it offsets. Agents, analysts, recruiters, all of their salaries are a negative. You want to fire them. However, and I made this mistake, your agent is going to get your athlete sponsorship deals. Your agent, it's important to hang on to them for a little bit. Get your sponsor deals signed so you're getting some extra revenue coming in, then let them go. hang on to them long enough to get those sponsorship deals. Once you have your sponsorship deals filled out, that's when you can move on. It used to be that it was only higher level athletes that were getting those sponsor deals, and the lowest ones didn't get them at all. No longer the case. Even the lowest athletes will get a sponsor deal. You just have to be patient and wait. Once they have it, that's your time to let those agents go. Now, obviously, eventually, all of these categories, all of these positions within your academy, you want them to be filled eventually. We are talking about the dire straits of starting from minimal. The better your income is, the more you can afford to have these various athletes or these various staff members in position at your academy. The physio is the most important one to hang on to. The agent is the second most important one to hang on to, but fill out your staff accordingly, downsize accordingly based on what your gains are. If you're starting from a middle level, you're going to have a better income. If you're finding you don't have enough cash, you're not generating enough, you're neutral on your balance, even though you had an easier start, trim the ones that you don't need. Trim the analysts. Trim the recruiters. Trim a trainer or two. That one in particular is going to have a pretty positive effect to your net. So depending on your setup, your balance might not be so terrible, and you might make slow gains here and there, even if it's minor. Or even if you take the hardest setup like I did, and you have to wait for that cash injection to have a positive balance on the 2nd of December, and you know you're only going to have it for a limited period of time. When you do have the finances, what do you spend them on? How do you make the decision on what upgrades to make? Because that is the key to improving your net income. You have got to improve the infrastructure. That's how you make money in this game. Winnings from tournaments are great. They need to be icing on the cake, not the cake. You need that positive balance from the cake. Then you start getting that icing on the cake from winnings. And it makes things go faster and easier. But relying on that is a terrible position to be in, because bad tournaments are going to happen. And you can't just compete because you need your athletes to get better, especially if you're starting with young juniors who need to grow and develop. They need to be training. You can't just throw them into a tournament every week, hope that that's your way to have a positive balance. So you need to have your cake, and that needs to come out of infrastructure. So the moment you have the finances, you need to start investing here. But where to invest? Early on, the last place you want to invest is going to be the business center. It has the lowest returns. The upgrades are very expensive. In time, the business center is probably your most profitable. But in the early stage, it's the hardest way to generate a profit. If you have the finances for it, though, it's good stuff. Without trainers, the Youth and Scouting Center is absolutely a category, a place where you can generate some decent cash. Some of these add absolutely no bonus to your finances, and the ones that do are incredibly expensive. So you're going to want to stay out of the Youth and Scouting Center early on as well. And that puts us in the Medical Center or the Sports Center. Now, the Medical Center does have some decent returns on it, and it does have at least a few less expensive upgrades available. So the Medical Center is not a bad way to go. But the Sports Center, early on, has the best return in terms of maximum versus what you're actually retaining. Remember, I said that it's not quite 60% of max. So whatever money it says you're going to get, you're not actually getting all of that money. Not until you have a 5-star academy and you have the best athletes and you have the best staff, then you're maximizing your income. But you're not in the early game. It's very much at the low end. It's very much half of what it should be, roughly, or even less, really. But if we look at the first one here, clay courts, is a great example of don't be deceived. The upgrade's cheap. It's only 26,000. You have 26,000 in the bank. Oh, great. Awesome. Yay. Max monthly income max is plus 3.9K. Do not be fooled by this. You've got to go in a little bit closer to see how much your income really will be. So if we click on this, I can tell you why the clay courts is a terrible choice. Right now, our monthly income is at 0 because it doesn't exist. We haven't built any clay courts as of right now. You build it, and yes, it will generate 3.9K. Your facilities also have expenses for those individual facilities themselves. Here, the clay court starts at 0, so okay, it's a net 0, but the monthly expenses will also increase by 3.7K. So what's the profit? 200. Oh, but wait, no, that's not right either. There's more. How much did I tell you? Roughly 3/5. In my game, through my first year, the calculation was 58% to be exact. 58% of the actual income. So take that 3.9K, multiply it by 0.58, 58% of what was expected, and you're down to 2.2K. Subtract the expenses of 3.7K, and not only are we not earning money, we're losing money. You take those clay courts and you spend that 26K and upgrade that, you're going to lose 1.4K per month. All of these upgrades need to be taken with that same level of scrutiny. Here's a better example for you. The Play & Co. connected courts, 48,000 to get the first level of an upgrade. So 48K, it's not cheap. It takes a decent amount of cash to come up with 48K. But here's what you're going to get. Revenue from 0 to 10.2K. Expenses from 0 to 2.7. Take that 10, multiply it by that 58% that you have, and you're going to have a revenue of 5.9. 5.9K is the revenue. Subtract the expenses, and your net gain from this particular facility, 3.2K per month. It's not a lot. But that makes a huge dent. If you're losing 15K a month, that additional 3K cuts that down to 12. You do that over the course of a year, and you're going to be nearly 40K better off. You get that 200K injection at the end of the year, 40K better off. That's another low-level infrastructure upgrade. That's how you have to slowly offset the negatives and the positives. But you have to be very careful about which upgrades that you take on. All 4 of the categories are somewhere between 40 to 60% of expected revenue. Without going through and calculating each of them every season all the time, like I said, the 2 categories that you really want to get started in early on until you're generating some decent income and can start pitching into other categories more frequently. When finances are tight, start with that sports center and that medical center and go through these upgrades into which one's going to gain you the most. The track, 42K, it might be more affordable, but it's going to cost you money, not generate. So go through and find the ones that are going to help you out. Grass courts, 59K, but that's going to be a negative once you subtract roughly half of this, right? 2.1. It's going to be a little bit higher than that, maybe 2.3, 2.4, but that's still going to end up losing 1,000 a month. The paddle courts, though, from its 0 to its first level, it's actually a great first upgrade. That was my first upgrade. And the second upgrade, you can see where the expenses might go up by 5K, the income side goes up by 18. So you're going to, get maybe 10 more of that? So it's about plus 5K a month for that next level, and that next level, it's 174K, right? We're not talking about a cheap upgrade. It's going to be a little while before you can afford that one, but 5K a month is a big deal when you are losing or barely earning. Hit up on those upgrades first, and your infrastructure will be golden. Now, the more your income is satisfied and taken care of and you have a net gain on a monthly basis, the more frequently you're going to be able to invest. When you make those investments, as you're starting to get stable, just be careful not to take a huge negative if you're only just stable. If you have really good income, really offset things well, and you're making bank on a regular basis, feel free to start taking those upgrades that you want. The upgrades that are going to help your athletes develop faster, that are going to allow you to hire more staff or allow you to hire more athletes, or those things that are going to come with a cost. Wait until the income is in a good state. So early on, it's all about the finances. Later on, it's all about developing the team. When you have that tipping point, it's going to be completely up to you when you make that decision. But I'd certainly recommend having a healthy, positive net balance before you start transitioning in that area, or before you even go through a phase where it's rather neutral, right? Generate a little more income with this upgrade. Help the team with this upgrade. Generate a little more income, help the team, right? Keep a balance before you tip to focusing on the team once the income side is really healthy. Hopefully this helps you understand the infrastructure in Tennis Manager and the finances in Tennis Manager. Of course, winnings are always a great way, but again, think of that as icing on the cake. Take care of that cake, get that net income into a positive state, and you will have a good experience in Tennis Manager. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Thanks for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there, and bye for now.